I woke to the muffled sound of something hitting my window. At first, I assumed it was just tree branches swaying in the early breeze. But then it came again. Thud, thud. This time, slower and heavier. I pushed myself up from my cot and wiped the sleep from my eyes. Dawn was only just breaking, and chilly mountain air leaked in through the wooden cracks. I pulled on my heavy flannel shirt and stepped closer to the window. What I saw made my stomach clench so hard I thought I would throw up. Right there, standing on my wooden porch, was a massive snow leopard. Her thick white fur was speckled with gray rosettes, and her tail swayed slowly behind her. But that wasn't what froze me. In her mouth was a tiny cub, limp as a rag. She looked right at me through the glass. Her eyes weren't wild or angry. They were tired, desperate, empty in a way I had never seen in an animal before. My hands started to shake. I didn't move. I just watched her. For a moment, everything felt silent. Even the wind stopped. Then she lifted her massive paw and tapped the wooden boards again. Thud. The same sound I heard. She wasn't trying to break in. She was trying to wake me up. I don't know how long we stared at each other. Maybe a second. Maybe a lifetime. But then something shifted inside me. Fear turned into something else. I couldn't name it. Maybe courage. Maybe stupidity. I slowly unlatched the door and stepped out onto the porch. The cold hit my face instantly. My breath clouded in front of me. The leopard didn't move. Her huge paws were covered in mud from the melting snow further up the ridge. Her whiskers trembled slightly. I took a shaky step forward. She lowered her head and placed the cub gently on the wooden boards. Then she stepped back, her massive body crouched low but her eyes never leaving mine. The cub didn't move. Its fur was matted and dirty, its little chest barely rising. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. I crouched down, careful not to make any sudden moves. My knees felt weak. I could smell her wild scent mixed with pine sap and damp earth. The cub let out a small gasp, almost silent, like it was drowning in air. I looked up at her. Her ears were flat against her head, and her eyes burned into mine. I whispered, "I'm not going to hurt him." I don't know if she understood, but she didn't growl. My hand hovered over the cub's side. Its ribs were sharp under its skin. I felt it shiver under my touch. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. The leopard shifted her weight, her claws clicking lightly on the wood. My body screamed at me to run, to get inside and lock the door. But I stayed. I couldn't leave him like this. Not when she had come here. To me. Out of every place in these mountains, she chose me. I pressed my hand lightly against the cub's chest. Its heartbeat was faint. Too faint. I whispered again, "Stay with me, little guy. Stay with me." The mother leopard let out a low, rumbling growl, but it wasn't angry. It was something else. Something I couldn't understand. I sat there on my knees, staring at this dying cub, feeling the weight of her eyes on me. The cold bit into my skin, but I didn't care. All I could think was, why me? Why now? Why would a wild predator bring her dying baby to a man? I didn't have any answers. But as I watched the little cub's sides tremble with every failing breath, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let him die. I stood there for what felt like hours, the cold biting through my jeans, my knees pressed against the icy wood. The little cub let out a tiny wheeze, and that sound snapped me out of my frozen shock. I forced myself to stand, my legs stiff and trembling. I backed up slowly toward the door. The mother leopard's eyes followed me the whole way, her ears flat against her head. I whispered, "I need to help him. Please don't kill me." Once inside, I shut the door, but not all the way. I needed to keep her in sight. My hands fumbled for my phone on the kitchen counter. I pressed the power button, praying for a signal. 1 bar, then none, then 1 bar again. I dialed the vet's number anyway, my thumb shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Nothing. No ringing. Just silence. I cursed under my breath and tossed the phone aside. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I ran to the back room where I kept supplies for the goats and sheep. On the top shelf sat a faded green plastic box, covered in dust. My animal first aid kit. I grabbed it with both hands and rushed back to the front door. The leopard was still there. She hadn't moved an inch. The cub was lying on its side now, its little paws twitching weakly. I took a deep breath and stepped out onto the porch again. The boards creaked under my weight. Her tail flicked once, but she didn't growl. Her eyes burned into mine with a silent warning. I knelt down, setting the kit next to me. My fingers felt numb, both from fear and from the cold. I unlatched the metal clasps and opened it up. Inside were syringes, saline solution, glucose packs, bandages, and small bottles with faded labels. I reached for the saline syringe first. My voice shook as I whispered, "Easy, little one. Easy." I pinched the loose skin behind his neck, just like I did with the goat kids, and slid the needle under. The cub let out a weak gasp, and instantly, a low growl rumbled from the mother's throat. My chest tightened in terror. I froze, holding the syringe in place, afraid to move. Her massive paw shifted forward slightly. Her ears flattened tighter against her skull. I swallowed hard. I whispered without looking up, "I'm helping him. Please, please trust me." She didn't attack. Her growl faded into a low rumble, like distant thunder. I pressed the plunger down slowly, sending the saline under his skin. His little body twitched at the sudden warmth. I pulled the needle out and set it aside, my hands shaking so bad I nearly dropped it. I reached into the kit for the glucose pack and tore it open with my teeth. I squeezed a drop onto my finger and rubbed it against his gums. His mouth was cold and dry. He didn't even react at first. I squeezed out more, massaging it in with my thumb. "Come on," I whispered. "Come on, fight." His tiny tongue twitched, barely noticeable. But it was something, a sign he was still in there somewhere. The mother leopard shifted her weight, her huge body pressing into the boards. Her breathing was shallow and ragged, as if she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes flicked from my hands to her cub's face, back and forth, never blinking. I reached for another syringe, this one with vitamins I used for newborn goats when their mothers rejected them. I didn't know if it would help, but doing nothing felt worse. I slid the needle under his skin, feeling how thin he was. Just bones under fur. When I pushed the vitamins in, he jerked weakly, letting out a choked, rattling cough. His chest heaved, and for a second, I thought that was it. That he was gone. Then I heard it. A low, guttural growl that vibrated through the wood into my knees. My eyes shot up. The mother leopard was standing now, her muscles rippling under her thick fur. Her lips pulled back just enough to show long white fangs. Her growl wasn't loud, but it was filled with something I couldn't place. Not rage. Not warning. Something deeper. My breath caught in my throat. I forced myself to speak. "I'm trying. Please. I'm trying." She took one slow step forward, her paw landing inches from my boot. Her face was so close I could see the dark freckles on her nose, the scars under her eyes, the dried blood on her whiskers. Her growl faded, replaced by silence so thick I could hear my own blood rushing in my ears. The little cub let out another small cough. Then his chest rose again, just barely. The mother blinked once. Her ears lifted slightly, and in that moment, I felt something pass between us. Something I would never be able to explain to anyone. My fingers felt numb as I packed away the empty syringe. The vitamins should have given him a tiny boost, but he didn't even open his eyes. His chest rose and fell in shallow, broken rhythms. The mother leopard slowly lowered herself back down, folding her massive paws under her chest. She rested her head on them and watched every move I made. Her eyes never blinked. Not once. I reached for another saline syringe, desperate to push more fluids into his body. His skin barely lifted when I pinched it. He was so dehydrated it felt like pinching paper. I slid the needle under, whispering, "Stay with me, little guy. Please." As I pressed the plunger, his body twitched, but there was no real reaction. His breathing turned into a rough rattle, like pebbles shaking in a tin can. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I would vomit right there on the porch. I looked up at her. Her ears twitched, and her whiskers shifted in the breeze. She made no move to stop me, but her tail flicked once, a silent warning that she was still there, still watching. My mind was spinning. I tried to remember everything I'd learned from Doc Harris when I helped him with orphan goat kids. Heat, fluids, sugar, warmth. But his body was so cold now. I pulled off my flannel shirt and wrapped it around his tiny form, holding him close to my chest. His head lolled back, limp against my arm. "No, no, no, no," I muttered under my breath, rocking him slightly. "Come on, fight. You're not done yet." His breaths became shallower, spaced out with long, silent gaps between them. Each gap stretched longer than the last. The world around me disappeared. There was only his small, cold body against my chest and the sound of his struggling breaths. I pressed my ear to his side. His heartbeat was faint, scattered, like a broken drum. I closed my eyes, fighting the panic rising in my throat. I whispered, "Please don't go. Please. His chest rose one last time, then fell. And then nothing. I froze. My lungs locked up. The forest went silent around me. Even the wind stopped. I felt his tiny body go slack in my hands. No. I pressed my fingers to his chest, feeling for movement. Nothing. I looked up at his mother. Her eyes were locked onto mine. She didn't move. She didn't make a sound. But something in her gaze shattered me. It was like she already knew. My hands shook as I placed him gently on the flannel shirt on the boards. His little tongue lolled out of his mouth, and his paws curled inwards. Tears blurred my vision. I slammed my fist into the wooden boards so hard pain shot up my arm. I yelled out into the silent forest, a broken, guttural sound ripped from my chest. But then, I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe madness. I placed 2 fingers against his tiny rib cage and pressed down gently, counting under my breath. 1, 2, 3. I tilted his head back, covered his nose and mouth with my own, and breathed a tiny puff of air into him. His chest rose slightly, then fell flat again. No, not like this. I pressed again. 1, 2, 3, breathe. I repeated it, feeling my own tears drip onto his fur. The mother leopard lifted her head, her ears forward, eyes locked on her cub's face. I kept going. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Minutes felt like hours. My arms burned with cold and exhaustion. My throat was raw from whispering the same desperate words over and over. Then his chest moved, just a twitch at first, then a weak gasp, like someone pulling air through a blocked straw. I held my breath, afraid to move. His chest rose again, just barely. His paws twitched, curling against my shirt. I let out a sob so loud it echoed through the trees. Relief crashed over me, leaving me shaking all over. The mother leopard let out a sound I had never heard before. A deep, trembling chuff, almost like a giant cat's purr mixed with a sigh. Her eyes softened, just for a moment. I pulled him closer to my chest, feeling his tiny heartbeat flutter against my skin. He wasn't safe yet, not by a long shot, but he was still here. And for now, that was enough. My arms felt like they were made of stone. I kept pressing 2 fingers against his tiny ribcage, counting under my breath, my voice breaking every few words. 1, 2, 3, breathe. I tilted his little head back again, covering his mouth and nose with mine, giving him another small puff of air. His chest rose slightly, then fell. Nothing else happened. Panic clawed at my throat. My vision blurred with tears and cold. I remembered another time, years ago, when I was still new to farming. One of my goats had given birth to twins. The first kid came out strong, bleeding and kicking, but the second was limp, blue around the lips, and barely breathing. I had called Doc Harris in a panic, and he told me exactly what to do. Massage the chest. Breathe for it. Don't give up until you're sure there's nothing left to fight for. I looked down at the cub in my hands. He was even smaller than that goat kid had been. Just fur, bones, and faint warmth. I whispered, "Come on, little one. Don't leave her. Don't leave me." I pressed again. 1, 2, 3, breathe. His mother shifted forward, her massive body rising slightly. Her eyes locked onto my face. I could feel her breath on my cheek, warm and heavy. Her lips pulled back just enough to show her teeth. The growl that rose from her chest vibrated through the boards under my knees. I froze for a split second, my heart slamming against my ribs. Every instinct screamed at me to back away, to run into the house and lock the door. But another part of me, the part that had spent years raising animals, bottle-feeding newborns, tending wounds, and fighting death every spring, refused to move. I spoke, my voice shaking. "I'm trying to save him. Please, let me try." Her growl softened, but her eyes never left mine. They were filled with something beyond anger or fear. Grief. A grief so deep it made my own chest ache. I turned back to the cub, pressing again. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Minutes bled together into an eternity. My fingers felt numb. My back screamed with pain from leaning forward so long. But I didn't stop. I kept whispering, "Don't give up. Please, please." Then, just as I was about to give in to the hopelessness flooding my chest, his little body jerked under my hands. A sharp gasp rattled out of his lungs. His chest rose, then fell, then rose again with another broken wheeze. I let out a sob that tore through my throat. Tears streamed down my face, burning hot against my freezing skin. I pulled him closer to me, feeling his faint heartbeat flutter against my fingers. The mother leopard let out a low, rumbling chuff. Her head lowered until her nose almost touched his tiny body. She sniffed him, her huge whiskers brushing my arm. For a terrifying moment, her golden eyes flicked up to mine, and I saw every raw emotion in them. Fear, hope, love, desperation. She didn't attack. Instead, she pressed her nose gently against his side, her breath warming his fur. A deep, vibrating sound rumbled from her chest, almost like a purr, but heavier, deeper. I whispered, "He's not out of the woods yet. We need to keep him warm." She didn't understand my words, but somehow she seemed to know. She curled her massive body around us, her thick tail wrapping over my back like a heavy blanket. Her fur was warm against my shivering shoulders. Her breathing was slow, steady, deep. I sat there, trapped between fear and awe, my arms wrapped around the cub, her body pressed against mine. Every few seconds, his chest rose and fell, weak but steady. My mind spun with questions. How did she know to come here? Why did she trust me, a man who could have killed her with one bullet? Why didn't she give up before this moment? I didn't have any answers. All I knew was that she chose me. Out of every cave, tree hollow, and rock crevice in these mountains, she brought him to my doorstep. Maybe she knew I wouldn't give up. And as I sat there, feeling her warmth seep into my frozen bones, listening to the tiny broken breaths of her cub, I realized something. I wouldn't give up. Not tonight. Not ever. The first gray light of dawn was creeping across the porch when I opened my eyes. My whole body felt stiff from sleeping sitting up, my back pressed against the cold railing. I blinked a few times, trying to remember why I was out here and not in my bed. Then I felt a small, steady warmth against my chest, wrapped in my flannel shirt. I looked down. The cub was breathing. Slow, shallow breaths, but they were there. His tiny sides moved with each inhale. My chest clenched so hard it hurt. I moved my hand and stroked his matted fur gently. His head twitched at my touch. Then, with a small, shaky effort, he opened his eyes. They were glazed, unfocused, but open. He blinked slowly, and a thin little sigh escaped his lips. I felt my face break into a smile, so wide it made my cheeks ache. Tears welled up in my eyes, hot against the cold dawn air. "Hey, little guy," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You're still here. You made it." Beside me, I heard the deep, rustling breath of his mother. She lifted her massive head from where it had been resting against my thigh all night. Her golden eyes met mine, blinking slowly. Then she turned her gaze to her cub. A low chuffing sound rumbled from her chest, so deep I felt it in my bones. She shifted her weight and stood, stretching out her long legs one by one. Her fur brushed my arm as she leaned down to sniff her baby all over, checking every inch of him with her rough pink nose. The cub let out a small, tired mewl, the sound so soft it almost broke me. She paused for a moment, her whiskers trembling. Then, with infinite gentleness, she opened her jaws and picked him up by the scruff of his neck. He hung there limply for a second, then curled his paws inward, clinging to the warmth of her mouth. She turned her head and looked at me, really looked at me. Her eyes burned into mine with something I can only call understanding. Gratitude, pain, relief, all tangled together into one silent gaze that spoke louder than any words could have. "Thank you," I whispered. My voice cracked and disappeared into the cold morning air. She blinked once, slowly. Then she turned away and stepped off the porch, her huge paws silent on the damp earth. She moved with a quiet grace that seemed unreal for something so powerful. As she reached the edge of the trees, she paused and turned back to look at me one last time. The cub dangled in her jaws, his tiny tail flicking weakly. For a few seconds, the world felt frozen. The cold wind stopped. The birds didn't sing. Even the sun seemed to pause as it rose over the ridge. It was just her, me, and the thin line between our worlds that, for a brief moment, had disappeared. Then she turned and vanished into the trees, her speckled coat melting into the shadows like mist. The bushes swayed behind her, and then there was nothing but silence. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty space where she had been. My arms felt heavy without the cub in them. My chest felt hollow, like she had carried away a part of me along with her baby. I stood up slowly, wincing at the ache in my knees. The sun was climbing higher now, flooding the yard with gold light that glittered off the frost-covered grass. I walked inside, leaving the porch door open behind me. The warmth of the stove felt empty, The house felt too quiet. Everything felt different. That day, I went about my chores in a daze. Feeding the goats, checking the fences, hauling water from the stream. My hands moved automatically, but my mind was somewhere else. With her, with him. That evening, I sat on the porch again, a cup of coffee cradled in my hands. The sun dipped behind the ridge, turning the sky into streaks of purple and burning orange. The shadows stretched long across the yard, reaching towards the forest. I listened to the sounds of the coming night, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant yip of a coyote far up the valley, the sigh of the wind through the pines. Then I heard it, a low, rumbling chuff, soft, almost like a giant cat's purr. It came from the edge of the trees, deep in the shadows where I couldn't see. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't see her, but I knew she was there, watching, listening. Every night after that, as spring turned to summer and the mountain flowers bloomed across the slopes, I heard her. Sometimes further away, sometimes so close I felt the boards of the porch vibrate under my feet. She never showed herself again. I never saw the cub grow into a young leopard. But I heard her, that low chuffing sound, carried through the night air like a secret prayer, a sound that said she remembered. And every time I heard it, as I sat there with my coffee growing cold in my hands, I felt the same thing. I had been a part of something holy, something wild and sacred that didn't belong to me, but somehow let me in, just for a moment. Something that reminded me why I was alive.